Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, welcoming you to an all new Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. That's right ladies and gentlemen, we're finally back, and today we're going to be reviewing the Hawker Hurricane Mark IIB, a British Tier 2 Battle Rating 2.3 fighter. Having already provided a historical overview of the Hurricane in general, which may be seen using the link in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now, let's just discuss the history behind the Mark II variant upon its conception and the sub-variant we see here, the Mark IIB. To start, we have to realise that in order to further enhance the British RAF's first monoplane fighter, i.e. the Hurricane, the improved Rolls-Royce Merlin 20 engine that arrived in July 1940 was fitted to a mid to late edition of the Hurricane Mark I, very soon after the engine's arrival, forming the testbed or the first prototype of the new Mark II. The engine for reference was an inline 1280 horsepower engine, featuring a two-stage supercharger which was crucial in improving the performance of the plane, not just at lower altitudes, but more importantly up at higher altitudes where the performance began to wane. As a result, this initial prototype and its subsequent successful test flights over the course of August 1940 meant that right at the peak of the Battle of Britain in September 1940, the first Mark IIAs, known as Mark IIA Series 1, were rolling off of the production line and into combat service. During the climax of the Battle of Britain then, the Mark IIA Series 1 was to acquit itself very well in the hands of its squadron's pilots, and this was thanks to the enhanced engine performance, and so this meant that whilst the Supermarine Spitfire was superseding the Hurricane on the production lines in terms of prioritisation as a fighter, the lifespan of the Hurricane was to continue on living. Instead, however, there was now an emphasis of establishing the Hurricane as a versatile fighter/fighter bomber, or indeed just a guns platform. And so, in order to achieve this, the fuselage was initially lengthened by a small extent, and this was to accommodate either the original wing or a newly developed wing that would enable the Hurricane to carry the following options: either a pair of 250-pound bombs, a pair of 500-pound bombs, or a pair of 45 or 90-gallon drop tanks. These wings also enabled the installation of 12 7.7mm Browning machine guns, with later developments allowing for 4 20mm Hispano cannons, if not higher power armament. Nonetheless, this new Hurricane variant, initially arriving as the Mark IIA Series 2 in October of 1940 through to the end of 1940, was officially declared as the Mark IIB in April 1941, and would establish itself with a reputation as being the Hurry Bomber, due to its overall versatility in the fighter or fighter-bomber roles. And so with that being said, let us take a look at how the Hurricane Mark IIB handles in War Thunder. Ergo, our gameplay for today is taken from the air domination map Malta, using the following setup. Stealth belts for our 7.7s, the reasoning here is because of the rounds available within these belts. The armour-piercing rounds will enable us to penetrate through onto enemy fuel tanks and engine decks, and the subsequent armour-piercing incendiary and base incendiary rounds will allow us to set our opponents on fire and leave them to a crispy death. The lack of tracers compiles with our 300-metre gun convergence, whereby we want to be close to our opponents, mostly through turn fighting or stall fighting, and open fire when they least expect it, catching them by surprise, and if we happen to miss, they may be none the wiser to our encroaching presence. On top of this, the 300-metre gun convergence will provide us with an ample amount of spread at distances of say 500 to 700 metres, and this is brilliant when engaging larger wingspan and fuselage-sized bombers, as we can provide an ample amount of damage spread across their entire fuselage at these distances. And finally, due to the limited range of the 7.7s, which hangs out to about 500 metres, we have the 300-metre gun convergence to allow for this, which means that we do not intend to be opening fire beyond 500 metres if we can restrain ourselves to, or we are going up against a larger target. Finally, we are using a 30-minute fuel load in order to ensure that we can make it to the end of the game unscathed in terms of fuel capacity. And so this opening climb has acted as an adequate demonstration of the climb rate of the Hurricane Mark IIB by comparison with its battle rating contemporaries. This plane can climb with most that it will face. Planes such as the Yakovlev Yak-1, Yak-7B, and indeed other aircraft such as the P-36 Hawk will be able to climb at approximately the same rate of the Hurricane Mark IIB, But then again there are some, which include the Spitfire Mark 1A and the Ki-43 Mark II, which will be able to outclimb the Mark 2B by a significant extent. And so you have to be careful of this in general, as you do not have the best climb rate for your battle rating or tier. Having gone head to head with a Blenheim Mark 4 and knocked their pilot out, and then doing the same against an AR2, we take a third head to head with a Yakovlev Yak 1. Fortunately for us, we happened to be grazed on our left wing, but still we took at least one 20mm cannon shell directly to the left wing. And we can see here how the great durability of the Mark 2B is holding up, whereby we still have a very good portion of our manoeuvrability despite the fact that our left aileron tab is now dark red. And so whilst we overshoot the Yak 1, due to our overall manoeuvrability being better at low speeds, we can very quickly move ourselves out of the way of potential incoming fire and then come around for another pass on them, this time knocking out their tail control and setting their fuselage on fire. This will net us with an assist, and we put a couple of rounds into a Ki-45 as well in order to try and pick up a secondary assist if possible. And as we break off, we continue to look around and ensure that we are not being engaged by the Ki-45 anymore. At the same time we go for a reload. The reasoning here is that whilst we do have 4,200 rounds at our dispensal, at the same time we have to be aware the rapid fire rate of the 7.7s and the number of machine guns available, i.e. 12, means that you will run out of ammo rather quickly if you hold the trigger down for a long enough period of time. Nonetheless, having reloaded and surveyed the scene to see we're the highest fighter in the skies, we notice a Focke-Wulf 190 A1 just coming out of the spawn and gradually climbing up towards us. We are not going to lie here, our roll rate is rather compromised, or slightly compromised we should say, through the damage from the Yak 1. But still it is approximately 75% of the original roll rate, and so this is not too much of a problem as the dogfights continue. The Focke-Wulf 190 A1 tries to climb up underneath us, and they do have a superior climb rate to us. But the difference is, now that they are low on energy, we can break over the top of them, cut our engine, enable our landing flaps, and bleed all of our speed out to ensure that we can pick up our third kill at very close range. Once again emphasising the importance of our gun convergence and also demonstrating the ability of the Hurricane Mark 2B to exceed its opponents in being able to cut its speed and its energy so well. This is mostly due to the landing flaps available, whereby they enable you to bleed your speed just as quickly as you can build it. And if we did not have the landing flaps engaged there, we would not have got that kill on the A1. We then rinse and repeat this process against the Messerschmitt 9 F1, who is climbing up towards us, and once again we play on the rudder and ailerons here in order to ensure that they only glance us with their 7.92mm machine guns. As they stall out we brake around using our landing flaps and a little bit of throttle control in order to pick up another kill. With 4 in the bag we now have a Hurricane Mark 1 coming up underneath us, but we are just going to loop over the top, as we still have such perfect manoeuvrability in this plane, and they are in a low energy state, due to their comparable, if not slightly lessened, climb rate by comparison with our own. And having achieved a critical hit now, and harassed the living daylights out of the enemy spawn, we now have to break off, as we have the Hurricane, a Gladiator, a Junkers 87B, and a P-38G Lightning all coming after us. And it is at this point that we're going to highlight one of the weaknesses of the Mark 2B, and that is its ability to pick up speed in a dive. The Mark 2B is one of the slower planes for its battle rating, although this carries over from the Hurricane Mark 1, whereby the top speed of this plane in arcade is approximately 518 km/h on the level, and at the same time as we pick up our ace in a day on that Hurricane, we have to realise that we are not going to be outrunning too many people if we start diving at the same time as them. Fortunately for us, we do start to build a little bit of distance on the Junkers 87, but now that the Lightning is fully engaging us, we are going to have to stay and fight. We cannot outrun them in this dive, especially now that they're opening fire at approximately 1.25 km. So here we are going to use a technique that British pilots used during the Battle of Britain against the Messerschmitt 9 Emmels, whereby they found, i.e. Hurricane pilots, that if they turned sharply, they were able to come around faster on their given opponent by comparison with the Spitfire pilots. And here this rings true as we go into a very tight head-to-head with the Lightning, as they miss us and we achieve some glancing hits. We are relying on our durability in order to shrug off the fire from the Junkers 87's two 7.92mm machine guns, and we pick up the kill on the Lightning for number 6. At this point the Junkers 87 has expended a good portion of their energy through their subsequent passes, and so we can stall out over the top of them, cut our engine, enable our landing flaps, and repeat what we did with the Focke-Wulf 190 A1 earlier, once again emphasising the ability for the Hurricane Mark 2B to bleed its speed so beautifully. And with 7 in the bag and a 2-on-1 engagement completed, we now break off towards the edge of the map and start to rebuild our energy and overall altitude and speed state, at the same time noticing that the central position of the map is being captured, and we do not want this game to end quite just yet. In the meantime, we have to consider, as we have emphasised it time and time again, the manoeuvrability of the Mark IIB in terms of its overall performance context. In order to enjoy this plane, you have to be flying within a speed range of approximately 200 to 350 km an hour. The reasoning is at 400 km an hour and in excess of this, the control surfaces will begin to lock up. We saw that with the dive up against the P-38G and the Junkers 87. When we went to make our sharp right turn to force them to overshoot and miss us, we had trouble rolling the plane to some extent, by comparison with our standardised roll rate. The roll rate itself is not the best in its tier. That would have to go to a Focke-Wulf 190 A1 or indeed the A4 at tier of 2. But the roll rate is one of the higher ones of the battle rating, i.e. 2.3 or the tier of 2, meaning you can very quickly change direction by comparison with a good number of your adversaries. At the same time, as we fly back into the central zone, we have to realise that the turn circle of this aircraft is very comparable to say that of the Spitfire Mk, although the Spitfire can just slightly outturn this aircraft at higher speeds. Nonetheless, it is a close one, and if both planes engage landing flaps, the Hurricane will maintain some of its manoeuvrability over the Spitfire to some extent, although this will be a very tight call in all given engagements. The turn circle is not as tight as that of, say, the A5M4 or indeed the A6M2-N, and so this means you are not the best turn circle fighter within your class, or indeed your battle rating, but you are one of the better ones. By comparison with the Hurricane Mark I, the turn circle is practically the same, and in most respects the two aircraft are very similar in terms of their manoeuvrability. Although when we come onto the addition of the Rolls-Royce Merlin 20 engine here, we will see what the difference is. And that is in terms of the plane's overall acceleration and performance with altitude, whereby in the Hurricane Mark I there was some frustration as you pushed above approximately 4,000 metres altitude, the plane's performance began to dwindle to some extent. The performance no longer does this, but one of the key aspects to realise is, with a battle rating going up to 2.3 rather than 2.0 and the tier switching from 1 to 2, you are now starting to go up against fighters which are made for the medium altitude range, or continue to perform well and better than this aircraft up within that range. Aircraft including the Yak-1, or the Yak-1B, or the Yak-7B, the Spitfire Mark 1A, and other aircraft such as the P-40 Kitty Hawk will all be able to match you or outclass you with increase in altitude, in terms of their ability to maintain a high top speed and continue performance up high. And the lack of performance is going to be felt later on within this aircraft, within this game, but we'll come onto that a little bit later of course. At this point we notice a P-36A Hawk coming up towards us, and here we're going to break over the top of them once again, and we can see that the Hawk is able to retain some of its energy, but in the end we are forcing them out into a stall. Although here the Hawk's ability to turn tight and maintain manoeuvrability with lower speed means that we are going to have to hang out on the rudder and indeed the ailerons for the time being, until they continue to bleed their speed to such a low extent, as we cut our speed down to approximately 150 km an hour and come around for the kill shot. We're able to set them on fire, and as their tail control is broken, we break away. Noticing that a Heinkel 112B Norton our team is trying to shred some of the enemy bombers. At first thinking it may have been potential fire from another enemy aircraft. We then look around and see a Junkers 87 up high, a Junkers 88 up high, and a Junkers 87 R2 coming directly towards us. But we can shrug off the head-ons quite easily thanks to our durability and our superior firepower by comparison with the Junkers 87. This enables us to set them on fire, although we can see that the fire is going to go out eventually, and so we have to be wary of the fact that whilst we would like to attack the Junkers 88 here, we cannot do so at the moment. Finally, we pick up the kill on the P-36A, and with 8 now in the bag, we are about to come around on the Junkers 87, or at least we are contemplating it. Now the Junkers 88 for the time being is going to have to get away with their overall endeavours. We continue to look behind and notice an I-16 also climbing up for the fight. And so at this point we're just trying to extrapolate some distance and hope that both planes decide to break off. Although soon we realise if we continue flying away we're going to hit the edge of the map. Fortunately however, the I-16 has broken off and we can go head to head with the Junkers 87 once again, picking up another kill, i.e. knocking out their pilot for kill number 9. And most of their fire went south of us bar when we got into close range, the reasoning behind our sharp break just as we got the kill. Nonetheless, looking around we see another P-36 Hawk right below us and we know they are climbing. So once again we're going to have to wait until they bleed out their energy and manoeuvre in over the top of them. Looking down, we notice they're opening fire and trying to really get at us. So here we are playing about with our engine control and indeed our landing flaps in order to take some hits but at the same time give them the idea that they may be able to knock us out before losing their overall energy state and starting to head down to the ground. We open fire here, and as the Hawk tries to break around, this is where we start to pick up our hits, achieving a critical hit on their tail control, but we're going to put them out of the game this time. Whereby we continue to open fire at approximately 100 metres, and we have to move slightly off centre here in order to ensure that our left wing machine guns do the damage, setting the Hawk on fire and allowing us to achieve our double ace. We now look up towards the Junkers 88, and having enabled them to continue on their chosen path, we now realise that they are approximately 4,000 metres altitude in the sky, by comparison with our own 2,600. Or indeed we believe this, although it could be somewhat higher. And so we are now going to emphasise the rather weak higher altitude performance of the Mark IIB by comparison with its battle rate and contemporaries, despite the fact that the engine has been uprated. Although before we can do this, once again we have to realise that there is a Messerschmitt 110 coming over, and whilst they are attacking our friendly Beaufort, the 110, if allowed to pursue us, has a comparable top speed to our own, so we cannot leave them unnoticed. We break down towards them, and as they go head to head with a friendly I-15 and knock them out, we're able to achieve another pilot kill for number 11. At this point we see a Nimrod Mark 1 coming towards us, and rather than try and turn fight the biplane, which will always win, we decide just to fly off into the distance. We believe that our higher top speed and our better acceleration on the whole with increasing speed will enable us to pull the distance and allow us to come around for another head-on pass. Well, this time we're going to deliver the full extent of our 12 7.7mm machine guns onto their fuselage. As, whilst we can both go head to head, only one of these fighters is going to emerge unscathed in terms of durability, and that is our Hurricane. And so with 12 now in the bag, we start to think about going after that Junkers 88 once again, who is most likely now at 5,000 metres altitude, and this again is going to act as a brilliant demonstration of the weaker higher altitude performance of the Mark IIB. In the meantime then, we've already discussed the manoeuvrability threshold, i.e. the speeds, and we said approximately 200 to 350 km an hour. But when we talked about control surface lockup, what do we mean? Well, there is a gradual lockup at 400 km an hour, and this extends through to approximately 600, at which point the control surfaces will feel heavy and sluggish to respond. Pardon me. And so this means that essentially in a dive, unless your opponent is flying on a very linear path, boom and zoom is a lot more difficult to achieve by comparison with a fighter such as a Yakovlev Yak 1. However, you do maintain much more controllability in a high-speed dive by comparison with a Spitfire Mark 1A, and so this is to be considered very carefully when you are in those higher speed and diving engagements. Here we try to outsmart the Junkers 88 by climbing up in front of them, which means we will be able to converge underneath them within the next couple of minutes or so. This also means we will not have to push our engine as hard to pursue the Junkers 88 by building up our speed whilst in pursuit of them. And so this is a very carefully placed tactic, and something which I am still practicing, as we can see here, where I don't quite judge it right, and the Junkers 88 soon becomes aware of what we are trying to do. Nonetheless, now that we're up at 4,300 metres altitude, we can see how our overall performance and indeed our climb rate is starting to break off a little bit. Nonetheless, we are now going to see how our gun convergence, being at such a short distance, works well in terms of spread. We knock out the tail control of the Junkers 88 A4 at a distance of approximately 600 metres, right on the spread threshold that we were talking about at the start of this game. Now that Junkers 88 has lost its tail control, they seem to begin to lapse down towards lower altitudes, which means we can level out once again, having picked up some speed in the dive, and try and put a few more rounds into them. Although they begin to break off, and so we decide to leave them, as whilst they are a juicy target, we have already done the damage required. Indeed, here we notice a Ki-43 and a Typhoon attacking a friendly Beaufort, and so we go into a dive. This dive is going to act as a demonstration of the fact that boom and zoom is valid in this aircraft, although it has to be against targets who are practically distracted or flying on very linear flight paths, as the Ki-43 and the Typhoon are doing so here. We start by looking at the Ki-43, the more lethal target by comparison with our fighter, but then we realise they are so entranced on knocking out our friendly Beaufort that the Typhoon makes for an easier kill at first, and we can always break our energy to come around for kill number 14 on the Ki-43. With number 14 now in the bag, with a very quick amount of fire delivered to their aircraft, we've cleared the tail of the Beaufort and we break around. And what is important to note here is that by comparison with the Typhoon, you do have the tighter turning circle, something which at first I didn't even expect, but the Hurricane does outturn its successor. Nonetheless, we press on. I'm reloading once again and noticing our water temperature is up to 297 degrees Celsius now. We continue to push towards the centre of the map to ensure that the enemy team do not capture the central field. We want this game to go to the end. Looking around, we now begin to build some more altitude, and we should move on to the discussion of the overall altitude performance of this aircraft as a result. Ideally, this plane works very well in an altitude range of 1,000 to 3,000 metres. This extends up to 4,000, but then you are starting to push the engine to some respect, especially by comparison with the opponents you may face. And having picked up our triple ace now with the Junkers 88 finally hitting the ground, we look towards an A5M4, or Jean-Claude. And as we look down, we notice they may be coming up for a head-on, and so we decide to go head-to-head. Although soon they break underneath us, and unfortunately we just cannot deliver the hits in time. Although the A5M4 was smart to evade the head-on due to our superior firepower and the fact we had the higher energy position. We loop over here to ensure that we push back into the centre of the map and prevent the capture, and we continue with our discussion of altitude performance. As I said, this plane performs very well within 1,000 to 3,000 metres altitude, and below 1,000 the plane continues to perform well. But at the same time, this does sacrifice some of the versatility provided in this aircraft, such as bomber interception and the ability to attack those who may be pushing for higher altitudes before they obtain them. Above 5,000 metres altitude, the performance will begin to dwindle. It is still there, but by comparison with a number of fighters you may face, it is not available anymore to some respects. And this is most notable when comparing this plane to the Spitfire Mk, which maintains its performance at higher altitudes much more noticeably. We begin to dive down on I-15 here, trying to pick up the kill, and we can see here how our compromised roll rate, with increasing speed, especially in a dive, having reached a maximum speed of 600 km/h in a dive, means that we cannot get the kill shot. Unless we break up in traditional boom and zoom style, and loop over for another pass. We have to also consider the acceleration of this plane, and the acceleration is alright, but at the same time this plane does sometimes struggle to get above a speed of 300 km/h. You will have to gun the web to a significant extent to build up your speed above 400 km/h, or indeed just take some time. Having picked up our 16th kill on the I-15 M22, we once again realise that we are one of the few fighters left on our team, and this means that we have to be careful with our boom and zoom style runs, and ensure that we do not always break down in order to grab the kill, before picking up a tail. As we come around, we realise we're capturing Zone A. Pardon me, that we're capturing Zone A. And unfortunately we make the personal mistake here of believing that the game's got a lot longer left to go. And so rather than staying up and capturing, we decide to dive down on this A5M4, when we should have stayed up high with only approximately 1 or 2 minutes left in the game. As a result, we are going to throw away the win here when it is the most easy win we could technically pick up. Nonetheless, we continue. And so we can see here once again that without using our landing flaps, it is very difficult to actually bleed our speed, as this plane loves to hold its energy quite nicely, and as it goes into a sharp turn, uses its landing flaps or plays around in the elevator and the rudder in combination. And when we talk about our control surfaces, we have to realise that the rudder is incredibly powerful, and at the same time the elevator responds nicely, and at the same time the ailerons work very nicely in response and combination with the other two control surfaces, and so this plane is a pleasant one to fly in general. As a result, it means that this plane is very easy to accommodate to any given fighter pilot within the arcade mode of War Thunder. Nonetheless, as we see there are only 40 seconds left, we start to realise our mistake. But at the same time, the time has now run out for us to capture. As we try to break around here, we only start to consider either going for the Heinkel 51 or the Messerschmitt 19 that broke off towards the edge of the map earlier. We go for the Heinkel, but then we realise that the Spitfire will probably be able to deal with them in the long run. We continue to break after them, but at the same time we do not have the turn circle that they possess, and so we carry through onto the Messerschmitt 19, as if we try to turn fight with the Heinkel, they will get the upper hand, and at the same time the 109 will be given a free run on us. But of course with 5 seconds left in the game, and the game now concluded, we've already made the mistake and thrown away the win, and we now have to take a look at the post-game stats. Hence, we can see that our 16 kills and 2 assists enabled us to obtain 45,030 silver lions. On top of this, we accreted 1,788 research points, with a further 715 going towards our work on the Spitfire F Mark 24. We hereby conclude our review then of the Hawker Hurricane Mark 2B by quickly contemplating how one can beat this aircraft in a given matchup. To beat it, there are 2 main approaches. Firstly, boom and zoom, whereby if you strike this plane from a position of altitude and thereby energy advantage, hit it in the midst of a dive and then brake back up to this altitude position, you will gradually whittle down its overall durability, as whilst it is a durable aircraft, its durability is not as legendary as say a Grumman F4F Wildcat. Alternatively, you can take the long distance head-on approach, whereby the limited range of the 7.7s that this plane fields means that it will only be able to do significant damage within a range of say 500 metres or less. Meanwhile, using 20mm cannons or indeed nose-mounted cannons such as that on the Yakovlev Yak-1, you are able to open fire sufficiently at distances of 1.1 km through to 0.7 km, strike some direct hits, break past via the means of a snap roll, elongate the distance and come around for another head-on pass, and this will gradually whittle down the Hurricane once more. However, if you intend to attack this plane from a position of altitude advantage, as you break up be careful, as the lower stall speed of the Hurricane, i.e. 140 to 150 km an hour, may happen to catch you by surprise as you break back up to the altitude position that you crave. Nonetheless, by playing to the strengths of the Hurricane we were able to achieve this score, as we implemented the great turn circle, great overall agility and manoeuvrability of this plane within a speed range of 200 to 350 km an hour, and also made sure to stick away from the overall boom and zoom style of play, as whilst it came in handy in some respects, it was not our main prerogative, and so this enabled us to come second by comparison with the rest of our team, as not only did we attack the enemy fighters, but we also pursued the enemy bombers, and took an all-round approach to what was a very tough game. Some of you may ask me why do I not field the 6 rockets on this aircraft. I feel that personally they are not required, as the 12 7.7mm machine guns, once at Convergence or within the Convergence range, will usually shred any given target to pieces, and the rockets will detract away from the overall performance that this plane craves, and that which is required in order for it to become a contemporary and indeed a competitor within its battle rating and tiering. But nonetheless, if anyone is looking for a versatile fighter which is able to take on any given opponent via the means of using its agility and overall manoeuvrability at lower speeds, then I would strongly recommend the Hurricane Mark IIB, as this truly is the workhorse of the RAF. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Yet until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies!